I bought this replacement sink. I'm gonna take my old one out, put this one in. I just bought it at a local home building supply store. When you do buy sinks, a couple of considerations are the number of basins, one or two, the depth of the basin, the distance from the back to the front, and the distance from side to side. Those are the three size components. Then you'll be asked for the number of holes. This relates to the faucet that you're using. Mine is a hot water, a cold water, and then those two mixed together into the faucet. You might have 2, 3, or 4. The fourth one might be like for drinking water, or a hose like for washing dishes. When you buy it, it'll come with one strainer for each of the basins that you've got, and those are pretty straightforward, right? So that part will come apart just on threads, and then the top part goes in, the bottom part threads up from the bottom of the basin, and then locks in place and keeps the water from feeding out. That then threads into the bottom of the strainer. And then goes into your water exit into your public water system. So there's one of those on each side. Then you also, depending on the type of sink that you're buying, it'll come with different attachment fixtures. This is a sink bolt screw, or sink bolt, it's not a screw. And basically there's a claw on here and a threaded sink bolt that winds the claw up, and the claw will grab the top of the countertop and then hold the sink in place. So those go into these little fittings down here. So you can see I've got one in. So there's the sink bolt goes in like that, in this keyed fitting, and then it spins down, and then you screw the claw in until the claw comes up and grabs the underside of the countertop. As you can imagine, if my finger was the countertop, you can see how it would lock in place. I'm going to show quickly how what the finished product is going to look like. That's my existing sink, so you can see my 3 holes. What I've got to do underneath is turn off the water supply to the hot and the cold, unbolt the faucet. I did not buy a replacement faucet. I just put this in a couple of years ago, but if you're buying a new sink, you'll have to buy a faucet. Just buy the one that you like. The reason I'm doing this, by the way, is I think the sink bolts and the fittings on the sink are not working very well. I can't get the sink to clamp onto the countertop very well, and there's water getting in. And I could caulk it up, etc., but I just felt like I wanted to do a new sink. Underneath, I'll give you a look. I'll start up again with the light. That's the underside of my sink. Size up on this, I have a garbage disposal. It's plugged in, so I'll just unplug that. I'll do that right now. Get all the electricity off. There's water coming in hot and cold, so that's the cold supply right there. I've installed like a braided hose. It's very flexible. Like in the old days, there was metal and then solid plastic pipes, so you had to cut them exactly right. But braided is much nicer, much easier to work with. So there's a cold water supply down there. I'll turn off. I've said before in many videos, I highly recommend these shark bite fittings. So I can take this valve off if I want to. There's a little tool that you apply to the shark bite fitting, and it just allows the whole thing to pop off. You don't need to cut through the pipes or anything. So I'll turn off the hot water, cold water. I'll turn off the hot water over there. Then what I'll do is uninstall the garbage disposal. So it's got a big threaded lock on the top that just spins probably 2-3 inches, and then the whole thing will pop off. Before you do that, you want to undo the return from the dishwasher, because the dishwasher empties and pumps its water into the garbage disposal where the bits get chopped up and sent out. You'll also undo the garbage disposal either here, or I'm just going to take the whole pipe off. It's a lot easier for me. And then you would unbolt the sink underneath by unthreading this bit. And this collar will fall down and then release the sink over here. And then you lift the sink out and replace it. So I'll go through all those steps. I'm going to start the work now. In terms of tools, I'm going to use a hammer just to unlock the garbage disposal from under the sink. You kind of need some force to unlock the threaded collar. And then you need a sink wrench, which is this sort of thing. It's got a little claw up here, and that allows you to reach behind the sink and get the and loosen up the collars that put the hot and water supply hoses into the faucet. It's really tight. You can imagine just trying to reach your hand up or with a wrench or something to try and get at those. It's really hard. So this pipe wrench is super handy. You might only use it once or twice ever, but having it will make life easier. I'm going to time this. It's 2 o'clock. I think it's probably going to take an hour and a half to do this whole job, maybe longer because of the videoing. I need a hammer, and I'm only going to use that to hammer the locking collar on the garbage disposal. It's kind of, you typically can't loosen it by hand because it's really in there. And then I've got a sink wrench. The sink wrench is specially designed. It's got a little jaw on the top that opens up, and the jaw fits around the locking nut that's underneath the faucet, and it keeps the water supply locked onto the faucet. I'm removing the garbage disposal, so there's the collar I talked about. I'll hammer it this way, and it'll come off. The collar will come off of the thread. A couple other things I said before, I'll say it again. Unplug it. There's a little spring here. I'm going to pinch that, and then that'll release the hose from the dishwasher. And then what I'm going to do is undo this threaded hose here, and then take the whole unit out. You could, if you want to, if you're putting this in, by the way, you'll have these 2 bolts on this little fitting right there. I'm going to choose to not do that. It's much easier just to take the whole pipe off. All right, that popped right off. That's what it looks like underneath. So what I'll do now is I'm going to unthread this collar and then remove the fitting for the garbage disposal from this sink and then move it to the other sink. And then I'm also, while I'm here, I'll turn off the water supply. So there's the cold water, and then there's the hot water over there. And this collar came off very easily. I just needed to hammer it a little bit at the beginning. And I'll just spin it till it comes out. All right, I've got to remove the collar and the strainer from this side. You can see what happened there was there's a little rubber washer on this model anyways, a little rubber washer. I pulled that off, and then the collar, or sorry, this the locking, I guess the locking collar was up here like that, and then that just slides off. Then what you do is you unthread this collar up here, take it all the way down, and then the entire strainer fitting can just come right out. All right, and there's the parts. So I've cleaned them off and dried them a little bit. So that fits through the hole, and then there's a large rubber gasket that fits here and keeps the water from dripping through the top part of the strainer. And then this collar goes on underneath. That locks the strainer in place, and then that rubber thing goes on the bottom, and then the last little attaching collar to for the garbage disposal. Okay, so I'll put those in now. Now I've got the pipe wrench, or sink wrench, sorry, attached to the nut on the top of the braided hose, and you can see you just let lefty loosey, just lighten it tight, undo the bolt. And you can see the way that the pipe wrench is so useful, because the jaw is reversible, and you want to be able to just spin it back like a socket wrench. Right there, I've got the first one off, and what I would suggest, by the way, is that you have a lot of rags around, because there's a lot of water that will come out, so just have that handy. And then make sure that you've got the water really tightened off. If you don't have it really tightened down, you'll know right away, because there'll be water coming out of here. I've got both of the hoses, or I guess they're hoses, off. And then you can use your hand probably to unclamp the 2 collars up here. Those are to connect the faucet from above to the inside cabinet of the sink. I've unbolted the faucet, so this should just come right up and out. There it is. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is clean this off and pop it onto the other. I have 2 more things to do. One is this collar on the other sink. I'll release that, and then the sink can come up. But I also need to remove all the sink bolts from around the edge of the sink. Okay, everything's unbolted, so that collar's off. Faucet's water supply hose is all gone. Garbage disposal gone. I undid all of the sink bolts, and I'm gonna lift the sink out. All right, there's the sink. It just popped right out. Okay, and you can see my old sink bolts in there, and I'll put the new sink back in. I've got the sink installed. It's nice and tight. What you have to do with the sink locks, by the way, is depending on your sink, the front you probably have to put the sink locks or sink bolts on first and then slide it in. But then the sides, I'll just show you. You've got access to the clips up there, so you can drop the side clips in, but not the ones at the front. Okay. All right, so I've got the sink bolts in, and you can see I've got a nice flush edge all around the sink. When you put the bolts in, I put 2 in here because this side of my sink didn't want to get flush, so I put in the max. You'll just have to go around and around and around to all the bolts, maybe 2, 3, 4 times, and get them all tightened down until you're happy with the sink. Right, I'm installing the strainer on the left-hand bowl. This is going to go into the exit hose. There's already one down there because I'm replacing this. So what I've got to do is get rid of the old one, which is here, and just get a wrench. This one's it's the whole tube here is kept in place with this compression fitting. So just get a wrench and open up the compression ring collar, and then this hose or piece will come out, and then put your new one in. All right, I'm just installing the strainer on the left-hand basin right now. So these are all different, but this particular unit comes with a small gasket that fits here, and then underneath, I'll show this later, but I've got the bottom half of the strainer fits below the hole, and then this is a threaded, I guess it's sort of a bolt that goes into the middle hole right there, and then you twist and twist until the strainer becomes nice and tight and there's no leaking. So down below, looks like this. There's the loose bottom half of the strainer. There's a rubber gasket that goes on the top, so I've got that in place. And then this bottom half of the strainer threads into this collar, which is connected to like a pipe extension that then fits into the plumbing of the kitchen. And there's here a compression collar that then locks the extension into place. Okay, so it's all watertight and should do the job. So I'm gonna now just feed that bolt from the top strainer into the top of the bottom piece and tighten it up. All right, that's all nice and snug. In retrospect, I would have done this before I installed the sink. You probably have better control over the installation without the sink being installed, but it was not a problem. The benefit was that it's flat, so I can get the thing all nice and lined up. This is a cheaper sink. If you have one that has like an emblem on it, like a logo, like a Kohler or a Moen or something, you might want to just do, get the logo set up nice. Most of these sinks are going to come with a fitting in the middle that allows you to use a screwdriver just to tighten it from the top. You can do it that way, or you can tighten it with your hands, whatever. I've got the base of the strainer installed. It's nice and snug up there, and you can see the gasket is compressed. Should be water sealed or waterproof. Connected the little extension onto the base, and that's nice and snug. And then I'll just put this compression fitting back onto the pipe. You want to get this white ring down nice and snug to the top of the pipe. That's what does the compression. The copper or brass ring here will compress that the plastic bit and keep it all nice and tight. All right, got the garbage disposal back on. One little tip: if you've got a spring like this, when you want to put the hose back on, pull the spring all the way back to the end, and that'll keep the edge of the flexible hose flexible enough to feed onto the projection from the garbage disposal. Then pinch the spring ends and then pull it over the the hose. Reinstalling the faucet now. Make sure you wrap the ends with Teflon tape before you put them in. You can do it after, but you know, getting your hand way up in the back behind the sink is a hassle. So put that in. And then I just realized I didn't need a 3-hole sink. I need a 2-hole, but that's okay. The extra one doesn't harm anything. And then from underneath, you want to reattach these clamping collars, whatever you call it, from below, and just twist I got the water supplies reconnected. In retrospect, I would have done this before I put in the garbage disposal because it's kind of a hassle having that thing here. So what I'm going to do now is just turn on the water and let's see if I get a drip. I'm hoping not. It's taped up and whatnot. All right, so there goes it's filling. All dry there. I can hear the water coming out of the top. So that's good. And I'll do the same thing for the hot. One thing I noticed is that valve that I just turned, it's the hot water supply, it is a little leaky. This valve is probably 25 years old. So what I'm gonna have to do is I'll have to turn off the whole house water supply. I'll do that differently, a different time. I'll turn off the whole house water supply because there's no way to shut this water off from down below. And I'll replace that whole valve, and that's where the shark bite fitting comes in handy. The shark bite, they sell the valve with the connection that goes right onto the PEX, and then it'll connect right up to the braid. Anyways, once I've got all the water running, there's no leak from the bottom of the sink, which is good. I'm not going to do the garbage disposal because it worked fine before, so that's good. That job's done. Like I said, if I knew in retrospect what I would encounter with this, I think it would take no more than an hour, maybe an hour and a half. It took me longer because there were some things I didn't expect, like my basins are a little bit big for the cutout from the previous sink, so I had to get a jigsaw in and trim some of the edges, widen them up a little bit, and the same thing with the sink bolts, right? So I had to cut some extra like holes along in the wood underneath just to get the sink bolts to fit in there better. But otherwise, yeah, really straightforward process. I think what I'll do now is I will apply a little bead of silicone around the edge just to be safe so the water doesn't leak in. Anyways, very, very straightforward. Absolutely, you can do this by yourself, and good luck.